All right. At 4 p.m. today, July 7, 2021, I am calling the Town of Adams Board of Health to order. I will note that we, pursuant to the waiver granted after the end of the pandemic emergency on June 15th, this meeting may be conducted remotely. There's remote access for board members as well as the public. But I should note that all three board members, Peter Hoyt, Joyce Brewer, and myself, David Rhodes, are here in the room, as is Code Enforcement Officer Mark Blaisdell and Administrative Assistant Bill DeRose. As you heard, this meeting is being recorded. And I will turn the floor right now over to Chairman Duval to call.
Thank you. This Board of Selectmen's meeting is now in session. In attendance today is myself, Chair, John Duval. Next to me to my left is Christine Hoyt, Vice Chair. And to my right is Joe Novak, member. Did we also announce Ed St. John, attorney? Okay, he's covered. Great.
Yes, note that he's here.
Okay. So that's all I have, ready to go.
The first order of business is a public hearing on the review and adoption of regulations pertaining to prohibiting dogs from town athletic fields. This request was brought to us by Steve Scrocky of DPW, who oversees town athletic fields. Officer Blaisdell has provided us with a template, a proposed regulation for adoption. The Board of Selectmen are here because it deals with town facilities. So this is a joint Board of Health, Board of Selectmen meeting. I would like a motion to open the public hearing.
Motion to open public hearing.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Pete?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Dave? Yes. Unanimously, the public hearing is now open. So I should identify board members previously named, Attorney St. John, Mark Blaisdell, Steve Scrocky are all allowed to speak in this public hearing. Is there anyone else? I don't see anyone else here. So has anyone logged in
There's no one else.
remotely? No. Okay, so Mrs. Scrocky, the floor is yours.
Can I ask just a point of order? So I have two copies of this regulation. One says draft. It was just put in our mailbox today. Can I pull what the differences are between what was provided 2 days ago versus what was provided this afternoon?
Okay, so the difference is that Mark Blaisdell had written up a draft proposal for the regulation, and the question was one of enforcement. If this is a Board of Health regulation, then we are responsible for enforcement. However, given that it's town facilities and our enforcement capabilities are limited, the question is whether Adams Police Department should be empowered to enforce this regulation. That particular, and that was written in green in the emailed version. So that that piece is up in the air. We knew it would be up in the air because we need to confer not only with the Board of Selectmen, but also with town administrator and police chief and animal control officer. So when I put out the public on the website,
Yeah.
I left that green section out because what we intend to consider here is just the pure regulation. And then the question about involvement of APD going forward, I think is something that we can fold in at a later time pending further negotiations. And I believe that Attorney St. John said to Chairman Duvall and myself that that involvement of the APD would actually require a bylaw change via town meeting. And so we're slow walking that one, but I put it there for completeness in what I sent to the board members.
The only difference is section 6 enforcement
Yes,
from what was provided, because I did see that there was in section 2, item D, there was an item or word that was redundant, actually, removed
Oh,
from that.
is
So I just want to make sure that there aren't any other differences. I mean, that's just a quick glance at the document that I saw, this one change. And I just want to make sure that I'm working off of good information and there aren't any surprises, because I haven't been able to read the updated version before this moment.
okay, well, that was a good pickup. If that is the case, I think it might have been underlined. Actually, I don't even, you said that there was a word removed in
So
the,
section 2, item D, in the piece that was emailed to us ahead of this meeting for us to review, it had said additionally, organizers, players, organizers, officials, spectators, and then it goes on. So obviously, the second mention of organizers was removed from the piece that was just put in our mailboxes this afternoon. So what I'm asking is, were there any other changes
I see,
made to the version that is now in our mailboxes?
I see, I forgot to update that. I point the finger at Michelle DeRose because when I posted the redacted version online, she said, there's a redundancy here. So I cut that out and what was posted online. This is the original that Officer Blaisdell provided to us.
And I'm not trying to be difficult, I just want to make sure that there is a record of all the changes that were made since what was sent to us on Monday.
Yes,
Or on Tuesday morning.
yeah,
Because again, I got this 5 minutes before the meeting.
Okay, so I might have an answer, is when the board decided to consider to adopt the regulation, I drafted the regulation, I sent the first draft to respective parties. So I don't know if that's the first copy that you got, but what I put in your boxes today was right off the website. So what you got today is the freshest draft.
Okay, but it wasn't in our packets, so it's not anything that I reviewed prior to today. And now I have this 5 minutes before a meeting and I'm supposed to be able to act on it. That's what I'm trying to get at. So if there were other differences than what was in the enforcement section and then the word that I now see is missing, I'd like to have a full accounting of all of those changes that were made for this draft.
I think, just to clarify, the green portion, and speaking of green, will require the input of Jay Green as well as APD. So for the purpose of this hearing, you may ignore that. Okay, so I put that there for completeness because that was the proposal. We cannot act on that today. And so other than the grammatical change that Michelle DeRose recommended, there are no other differences. Is that fair?
Right, and just to clarify that what's presented in black and white will not show the green. So as Chairman Rhodes pointed out, that section under section 6, that subsection is gone from the freshest draft.
Okay, so may I call back on Mr. Scrocky to briefly explain his rationale for asking.
All I'm asking for is to keep the dogs off the athletic part of the fields where they actually play the games, not the outlying areas. You know what I mean? Some are fenced in and some are, they have fields where people close the gates, go in the field with their dogs, throw frisbees around, and who knows what else. And I don't think it's fair to us working on the field or the kids playing. You know? That's my only concern, the actual field where they have competition, not the outlying areas of the field.
So may I, for clarify, two things, that we did receive communication from one individual, which I will state in a bit, but how many fields are we talking about
We
here?
got four, we got three, which is just softball, which is fenced in, but there's also a park around it. So there's plenty of area for your dog. And then you got Valley, which is a different scenario because it's all, the whole field is soccer and baseball.
Okay,
So you almost have to regulate the whole field. You know, Renfrew is easy, it's fenced in, football and baseball. And Russell's another tough one because we just did that over.
right.
And we don't have a fence for softball. Like temporary fence. But there's a lot of area outside the field where people open their dogs or, you know, I'm just concerned about the actual.
And then Russell Field is the fourth one, right?
Yeah, Russell, Renfrew, Valley and Reed.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
And so Bow Field is not,
it's not used for athletics.
right?
Right.
Okay. And then the second point I would make is that Coach Bishop did confer with Corey Bishop did confer with Officer Blaisdell and said that as a coach, he was in favor of such a ban because of course there is the dogs defecating on the field. And he said that another issue is that particularly during games when there are several dogs, they can get frisky with each other and pose a distraction to the players, coaches, and referees. So that was the only outside comment that I have that I'm aware of.
We've had signs up years ago, but I don't know where that started, like more dogs along. I don't know the history of that.
So, yeah, so I think,
So just get out of hand.
yeah. Okay, Christine.
So I have a question. So we also have Quality Street Field. There's Sierra Street Field.
Oh,
There's Bow Field. There's Beaver Park. All could be considered fields and parks under this regulation.
No, I'm
So
talking
how do
about-
we
but
specify?
where games are actually played, baseball fields, football,
Okay,
softball,
okay.
soccer. Those other places are no concern to me, maybe to somebody else.
So would it be helpful to specify the fields under this order? That
Right.
would
Under
not,
section A, under purpose, where it talks about the town's athletic fields, we're in a section that defines what athletic fields are.
yes. So it would be the four fields that,
Right.
yes,
Well, Russell has a lot of area, not where the softball field is, wide open. You know, you can still walk their dog or whatever. But
isn't that over by the play structure area? You're talking about over by the play structure area?
yeah,
So that, I mean, it's still kids,
exactly. It's a great area there.
yeah.
For sure.
Mr. Straka, can you explain how the situation is getting worse and what's your observation?
Why, I know our workers have cut grass and come down with dog feces on their tires and everything else. I have seasonal whip the fence line and nothing's worse than where this dog stuff and getting all over your clothes, and your face or whatever.
Is it your opinion that it's the problem, it's not gotten worse.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think athletic field's a place for a dog or any kind of animal. That's my opinion.
Well, thank you. I think,
Another question?
Yeah, I've got a question too.
yeah, go ahead.
So I just want to understand the this issue at this time. So you and your fellow employees, you guys cut the grass and you come across.
And I paint the fields too.
Right, so you guys.
I come across.
So where does this impact the employees of the town?
So it does,
This regulation, which indicates, let's see, the regulations intended without circumstances, of dogs, potentially harming, whatever, is this anything to do with the employees of the town? So is it something that you come across as a nuisance? That take care of? And
Yeah, but it's a nuisance for the players,
Well, let's stay with yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Please.
Oh, yeah.
It's a nuisance for the employees.
Correct.
As a health, you consider that, to the chair, is that a health impact to the employees?
so you suggesting that be an additional,
I'm not suggesting, asking a question. I just want to make sure we do this, step by step here, that, so. Mr. Strachey came across this, it's been a nuisance, been a problem for years. The employees have submitted, or not submitted, but have discussed concerns about this with, who have you discussed concerns about this with? The supervisor, or what's the chain of command when you have an issue?
when they directly to me and then I got,
Can you go to Tim?
yeah.
So I'm saying, okay. So I was just curious, is this, you know, the town employees, is this also an issue for them, or just they included with this? You can think about that. And then, so that's one input, and then we had an input of a coach. So the code enforcement officer, it was indicated that you talked to a coach in regards to. Hey, Mark, so after Mr. Strachey, the employees had concerns, they went to their supervisor. And then you had talked to a coach, how did that come about? Did they call you? So I haven't heard from any president of any leagues, unless the Parks Commission has, in the past, that they have. So I'm just trying to get you educated on this.
So various folks had approached me prior to me approaching the Parks Commission some months ago. The Parks Commission reviewed my presentation and they did not endorse it. I told them that if they did not endorse it, I wouldn't even bring it to the board. And then Mr. Strachey and another individual approached me and I said, I'm going to leave it up to you to present it to the board, which they did. So Mr. Bishop's conversation was actually via email. That's how I notified Dr. Rhodes of the content as well as the permission. Presented.
And the last thing, it was probably in the media, but what was the reason that the Parks Commission did not support your requests?
Because my language, and of course it was not in written form, it was just in verbal presentation. My language was parks. Okay, and so this draft regulation and Mr. Strachey's presentation is specific to athletic fields.
Thank you.
Yeah, my concern is, how are you gonna enforce this? When it comes to enforcement, people have to be there, you know, a goodly amount of time to catch people that are, you know, doing this. And should this go through, is there gonna be a grace period so people can be attuned to know that this is the situation at
That's gonna
hand?
get learned.
Okay.
Sort of like with the cemetery, we had open dogs.
Yeah.
And people still do open dogs. Well, at least we have a right to say no dogs. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
At this point, we have nothing. Just they use the fields as they want. I don't think it's right.
Actually, there are signs at each and every field that prohibits dogs. Where those signs got their authority,
That's what I said this before.
so this signage, and that's your first level of communication.
Now, is this, I'm not familiar, is the signage present right now on fields?
Yes. So,
Some of them?
not all.
Yeah.
Well, in two different forms. One sign says no dogs, and each of the fields has a rather large window size sign with multiple regulations, with multiple conditions.
Yeah, I've seen those signs before.
So it's like dead center in the middle of that list are no dogs. So there has been signage at all four of these fields restricting dogs access. Also, if I could back up my presentation to the Parks Commission, pets. It didn't just restricted to dogs, it was pets. So this is restricted to dogs and at fields. And as far as enforcement, there's already signage up there, and that's been there since who knows when. Typically, and for those types of events, just like during COVID, when sporting events occurred up there, if someone had observed a violation, they can report it without the police being deputized, if you will, for this. They'll have to report it to code enforcement office. If they have photographs or if it's on social media, we can verify it and then try to identify the individual who's in violation and then contact them that way.
Yeah, I'm surprised that there hasn't been more discussion about this. I would think that a lot of people don't even know this is going on because there's so many people that are dog owners
Correct.
that, you know, I don't even think they have an idea that this is something that we're discussing right now. I'd be surprised because had this been, you know, put out in the public and have a little give and take, I'm just very surprised because there's so many dog owners and historically, you know, dogs have gone to parks and it's the individual, not the dog, that sometimes is the perpetrator more than the dog.
Well,
Could I, if I could,
No, high school, you can't go dog
Right.
football. Can't get into the.
if I could interject here, Mr. Fournier, after our June 9th meeting, when this issue was brought up, spent most of his article on the Board of Health on this dog issue. And so it was put out
I
publicly
saw that, but
straight away. And then we did make our public notice for the June 30 meeting, which we had to postpone the hearing until, but so there were two public notices made that we are dealing with this. And so if you didn't see it, it's not on us.
but I would think that it should have been something that was brought forth to the selectmen first, so in one of our televised meetings, we could bring it out that this is a possibility. Because once again, I'm quite surprised that no one is, you know, zoomed in to speak of, to, you know, give their thoughts on this, because it's certainly historically, dogs and parks kind of go together, you know.
No, parks, but not athletics.
Yeah.
Not
There's a
athletic
big
fields, that's the
difference.
distinction, yes.
It's,
Well, my question is, for instance, so you'd have to ban all dogs from Valley Street Field, right? So that would be a ban and for animals. And then once again, as David brought up, when you're talking about Russell Street, you have the playground down there, and you certainly don't want kids around feces. So that really puts a ban on that field pretty much, other than, you know, just a little area here and there, you know? So, you know, it's just something that as Christine mentioned, I just got this draft, and so I haven't really had time to digest it too much, but those are my initial worries about this, because it's going into something that's historically been the way that people bring their dogs to the parks, you know? And, you know, you go down there and you watch a girls softball game or any game, and, you know, the parents bring their pets, and, you know, they're part of the background.
So again, I just want to emphasize that each of these fields does have signage.
Yeah.
That's been there a while. So for someone to say, I was not aware of this public meeting, because there's actually no prohibition against dogs on the fields, I would argue that the average person who goes to these games says there's no dogs allowed, because it says it right here.
Yeah, but I'd argue back to you that people aren't reading them because there's dogs at all the games still. So apparently they're not reading it, or they're not subscribing to it, saying, well, I'm gonna bring my dog anyways, and that comes back to the enforcement problem.
Well, now we have fines. And so if Officer Blaisdell shows up at a game, there's a dog there, person can be cited. And I forget who, I think you said, well, what about a lead-in time? My proposal will actually be to make this ban, this prohibition immediate, effective tomorrow, but to postpone the levying of fines for some period of time, which we should discuss. I know Attorney St. John likes 30 days. Maybe we can make it shorter, but anyhow, that's up to us. But that if one person is caught violating in the fine-free period, that still counts as a violation. So the next violation would be the next level fine up.
Yeah, I think that within this also, that you have to have an exception for people that have to have dogs.
There is,
Okay. Is it written in here? Because I didn't read it.
Joe, it was emailed to you, and it was on our website. It was available in the town office, so I'm sorry, this is, yes, service dogs are allowed,
Okay,
as long as they're appropriately muzzled and leashed.
It's section 4, item B.
I didn't get a chance to read it. I didn't even read the original draft. I've been just too busy. So.
I do, but I actually don't see it on the website, David.
You don't,
I don't see this on the website as part of the agenda that was posted for today. I might just be missing it, but it might be someplace else. But aside from that,
it's under regulations, town of Adams regulations.
it's under regulations and not with today's meeting. Okay.
You mean on the calendar?
On the calendar for today's meeting, the agenda is posted, but this draft is
So,
not
for instance,
for a public hearing.
when I don't want to get, I don't want to go into the weeds here,
Yeah.
but when you as select board voted on job description for Officer Blaisdell, that was not
Wasn't a
That-
public hearing. Wasn't a public hearing.
was not a public hearing.
This is a public hearing.
Okay,
And to Joe's point, this wasn't made public to the public for a public hearing.
but it is there under regulations. So
Okay.
prohibition of dogs and it was in the newspaper, it said you can call the health office. People had, and I believe Mr. Fournier actually put
He did a nice job with the article, I think.
and he put the website, a link to the website in his article. And so,
I did have another question though, and maybe town council can help with this. So there's lots of comments about that there are already signs that are posted, there are already regulations in place. Are we sure that there isn't already a regulation that is written that we just haven't found and went someplace else? And so this is just a revision of a regulation instead of rewriting an entire reg that's like, has that research been fully done by everybody? Because there are signs, so I would
That's right.
assume that there, I shouldn't assume, my fifth grade teacher told me what assuming does, but, I would think that there was a process at some point, there's a regulation somewhere. I haven't found it in my quick search, but is there one that already exists?
I did not find,
I don't want to be reinventing the wheel.
I myself looked and I did not find.
I just respond to that. I'm not aware of any town bylaw on it, but it doesn't mean I haven't exhausted my review of it. Quite possibly, it could have been done by way of, you know, something that the Parks Commission proposed years ago that the selectmen adopted. I don't know what that is. This is a different thing altogether. This is coming in under the authority of the Board of Health has under Chapter 111, Section 31, to deal with health issues, nuisances, and that type of thing. And I think it's a completely different animal than putting up signs elsewhere, so to speak. It's, yeah, I know. But anyways, the point that they're trying to get across here is that they're addressing, within the authority the statute gives to them, they're addressing a health and nuisance issue, which they have every means to do. It doesn't mean this is the perfect regulation to do it. And I have myself some issues with the language in the regulation. I've pointed out with regard to the Adams Police involvement in this. I have issues that you raised with respect to the definitions. You know, I don't know what athletic fields means by this. So if somebody were to enforce this in court, how do you know that there's been a violation on a quote athletic field if we don't have it defined? I heard about, you know, 4 fields, but I don't know whether what's being covered. Is it the playing surface of like Renfrew Field, for example, and we're saying it's okay on the sidelines, you know what I mean? That type of thing has to be defined. And it has to be defined with enough specificity so that it can be enforced by Mark Blaisdell as the code enforcement officer. Otherwise, he doesn't know what, I mean, he knows probably what to do. By law, you know, he wouldn't be able to say, well, that dog just did his business over here, and that's on the athletic service when nobody's.
Go ahead.
Okay. So if we can get back to notification of the public, I think that we have very well informed the public, regardless of the signage that's there. I did email all of the sports coaches, and those are actually the stakeholders. And just like COVID, they were the ones that were responsible for monitoring those all activities related to COVID standards. So all of the coaches we've given permission to use our athletic fields have been told twice of this, and they're provided a draft regulation. And as I stated, only one cared to document his opinion. He's a dog owner, and he's fully in support of this regulation. This regulation is a draft, and it's written as a draft for all other inputs, and that's what we're here today to do, is to get any other input. And as you know, we'll make an approved definition of athletic fields. If we have to continue to another day, we certainly will do that. But I think most importantly, I think the public has been notified, and of course, with the statute, we've gone above and beyond notifying all of our spring, summer, and fall coaches of what we're discussing here today. And they were all informed or invited to be here. They all informed or invited to submit a written comment. And that's what Mr. Bishop did. He wasn't going to be able to make last week's public hearing, so we put it in writing. And that's what I forwarded off. So that's all I have to say.
My main problem with this is that it's basically in some ways using a sledgehammer to push an attack, because it's a few violators that create the problem. But on the other hand, any child slipping on a pile of feces. Any coach distracted at the wrong time. I think the benefits of this do outweigh the, draconian, I don't know if I can use that word, nature of this regulation.
And I'd like to say too, if this should go through, my thinking is that dogs should be banned from all the fields because I just don't understand the enforcement of how you're going to, go and find that someone did this but if there's a ban on all dogs from the fields, no dogs on the fields, I think that would make it much more easier. Not saying that I endorse that theory, but when you start saying, well, on an athletic field, like Mr. St. John said, you're getting into some gray areas. So as it stands, as I mentioned, so far, I'm looking at 2 of the fields pretty much can't have dogs on them because they're, one's a complete field for athletic use. So it's an athletic complex, which is Valley Street. And then Russell Street, because of the playground, little kids, they're more vulnerable to that type of stuff, in my opinion, kind of, looking around and fooling with it. So it's just, as I mentioned earlier, it's an enforcement situation in my mind.
Tennis courts there.
What's that?
Tennis courts too.
Right.
They could go to tennis courts, whatever,
Right?
with their dogs and throw frisbees. And
Yeah, but that's why, I mean,
that's
it's
it.
just, it's kind of gray about, what is the part that they can go on and what's the part that can't go on. And,
Oh, yeah.
you'll get some to do from people if they're saying, I wasn't on that part, you'd have to catch the dog defecating in a certain area in order to make it happen.
Right, and so that was one of the reasons why I presented it to the Parks Commission as parks entirely. You've got a park at the end of Quality Street, and I get several complaints about dogs being there. There is a sign, but there are several complaints, and that's only a playground. It's not an athletic field. So you have people who complain about the entirety of dogs doing their business on property that kids are going to be playing. Again, we can either make an amendment to the draft regulation and include all parks. And again, I emphasize that the signs are there from what authority, who knows?
If Mr. Latham can elaborate on where the signs are placed, because I did ask Mr. Scrocky if Quality Street would be considered in this. And he said no, because it's not an athletic field, but you're telling me there's already signage there. And so where is the signage currently placed?
Yeah, so it's right next to, so you have 12, 14, 16, 18, that's all one block. And then you have a park, and there's a gate right there.
At Quality Street,
Yes,
okay,
and then over on Sierra Street
Yep.
also.
there's a sign,
And that park is about as big as this room.
yeah,
And there is no fence there, there's a sign.
but there's already signage there, no dogs.
See, we used to have swing sets and all that here, but it's not there anymore.
I haven't
No,
know
it's just
whole
a
field, but
Yeah.
my understanding is that there are no sports activities played there. There may be some scrimmage.
Not to belittle this, but who put those signs up originally? Does anybody know?
It's there. Exactly.
Don't know.
I've seen them, like, they seem like they're relatively kind of new.
So the purpose of this regulation is basically to, don't use the word mandate, but basically put this as a formal regulation rather than just someone putting up signs. And so that on the signs that would ultimately get put up, should we pass this, it would say per order Board of Health, so that it would be know that there is official backing rather than just, I don't want dogs in this field. Or
But can anyone in this room definitively say that there's not that regulation already in place that would actually include parks, and now we would be eliminating parks by just tackling athletic fields? So you're telling me definitively, you can say that there is not a regulation in place and those signs were put up on mistake and under somebody else's,
No, I can definitively say there's no such regulation
okay?
because Parks Commission and Cemetery Commission cannot make regulation. As far as regulations pertaining to public health and public nuisances, that's the jurisdiction of the Board of Health. There is no such regulation that's been considered or even approved by the Board of Health, the Adams Board of Health. My review of the bylaws, which would go before a public meeting, there's no consideration for this, so that's not a regulation, that's a bylaw, separate statute. So definitively, yes, there is no such Board of Health regulation in effect here in the town.
But this regulation could make it null and void for any type of bylaw that bans dogs from parks. So
no, we are being,
it could, they could happen simultaneously, like, I'm just trying to get to the, we've got parks listed here that have signage already in place. So there must be something in place, and it's my assumption that this
Right.
happened before any of us sitting in this room. But I'm just trying to make sure that everything is in line and inclusive of that, or, you know.
Yes, so I can answer that with another scenario. We have a Board of Health regulation with regard to trash hauling. There's also a bylaw for trash and trash hauling. They are succinct, okay?
Yeah.
And then there's a statute, which is its own jurisdiction. So, should town council find an obscure bylaw that's valid in fact, it's the board could then revisit and decide whether or not they want to amend it. Now, of course, this is not ready for approval. Amendments or edits have to take place.
Right.
So again, that's what we're here for tonight, or maybe the board would consider a subcommittee finalize a draft and send it back to the joint board.
This is gonna be my last piece of time as I'm going on, but I'd like you to go back to the parks because they're the park commission, because they're the group that we assigned for the parks here in Adams. And they came back with not endorsing that. And you said that, it wasn't made clear. So now that you have this draft, I think it would be nice if you could go back to the park commission and try to talk to them. And, now that we've met as a group, that's the last thing I'm gonna say, because I think it's important to get the endorsement from the Parks Commission because we appoint those people to oversee our parks. And I think it's important that,
So I can't respond to that.
Okay.
Does Dr. Rowe want to respond to?
I don't think the urgency here is that our town athletic fields are places where out-of-towners are invited in an organized way, unlike parks where people just show up and it's not like there's a big event, except for Bow Field, for instance. And so my feeling, what's the difference with the athletic fields? It's because we're inviting out-of-town guests. And I feel that ramps the urgency of this particular request. And if Parks does not want to come along, that's maybe they can come along later, but I feel there is an urgency here. with the parks in which we invite out of towners.
Agreed, and I'll also add that the smaller composition of the Parks Commission was initially notified, and then when the other members of the commission were appointed, as a matter of fact, today, I also this, so they did get a late notification. I didn't have their email until this morning. They do have a meeting coming up,
Yes, the agenda has been posted.
so the agenda has been posted, and you'll see on that agenda, sorry, that they are, and Dr. Woods, if you're looking too, that this topic is on that agenda. There are a lot of cooks in this kitchen. Okay, so you have different folks doing different aspects of the draft regulation.
No, that's Monday. Yeah, they haven't posted their agenda yet. Is that right? Monday,
It's
the,
posted.
oh, okay, it is posted. Yes. All right, there it is.
It was slow to pull up.
And
So again, they were invited, or at least the chairman, and one other member was initially 1 month ago invited, and input was sought. No opinions was returned. So again, I strongly
But I don't.
Request
see
that.
it as
I don't
It's
see.
not an agenda item.
Oh, wait a minute.
Is it?
Oh, no, these are just walkthroughs with,
Discussion on the use of bathroom and concession facilities, general discussion on topic of youth football, Russell. Continued discussion regarding Russell Field, town facility request for Renfrew, town facility request for Hoosick Valley football. Discussion of potential Sunday football games, discuss status of tennis courts, discuss pickleball, discuss fall softball. I do not see,
So is that something that you would ask me to add to that? I don't recall.
the
All
chair
that
has
was
to
gonna
do
be
that.
specific.
we would have to go through the chair of the Parks Commission.
Okay,
And the next meeting is not until August. So anyhow, so they're,
So, all right, so I apologize. They were invited to the meeting that was supposed to take place last week. And then after that was rescheduled to tonight, they were notified again, and then the 2 additional members were notified. All that notwithstanding, I think you should move forward with any edits, or as I stated, maybe you want to establish a subcommittee, who can present edit, make edits, and then present the final.
I think and I will have to rely on Attorney St. John to how we actually parlay this together. I have one last question for Mr. Sprocki, because we've been talking about all the parks. Same problem with the non-athletic field parks? Okay, so where we are,
The actual athletic part of the. All right, what goes on? You know, I'm more concerned about the workers working at them and if people
Yeah.
are using them. Out of towners coming to tournaments and, you know, I don't think it's right.
and then for Mr. Blaisdell, the draft that you provided for us to work on, was that from North Adams or Pittsfield?
It was primarily taken from Pittsfield, yes.
Okay, so Pittsfield has a similar, in their case, an ordinance regarding athletic fields specifically.
Well, their Parks Commission, Parks Recreation and Open Grounds. So yes, it was taken from Pittsfield sources.
But limited to athletic fields here. Okay. well, I think
This is your public hearing. I just have one more question.
yes,
So you guys decide that's your responsibility. The enforcement of this, as of this, regulation being generated and posted, according to you, Dr. Rhodes, you'd like to see it done by tomorrow. Probably not gonna happen. You want to get that legal. I would imagine if it was me, I'd have this review and have Attorney St. John review this and then meet one more time and then make it official. Whatever you go, but anyways,
yes, he has reviewed it, so,
He has reviewed it,
yeah, so,
with all changes.
yeah.
So the enforcement aspect of this is, if this goes into effect tomorrow, will be the code enforcement officer who will have authority to enforce this. Right,
No, it lists Board of Health, board's designated agent, so I think the Board of Health would then have to vote to designate their agent as a code enforcement officer for said regulation. But this enforcement under section 6, item A says it's the Adams Board of Health.
okay, so Attorney St.
That's
John.
how I read it. I don't know if Attorney St. John wants to.
Right, that's Attorney St. John. Is that someone that they can adopt as an enforcement officer, someone that works for the town, works for the police chief, who works under the authority of the board of selectmen? Can they appoint the code enforcement officer to work for them to enforce this new regulation?
Okay, so you threw in the Adams Police and I would.
That's who
the
she
Adams
works for. Police
The animal control officer is under the jurisdiction of the Adams Police Department,
Yes.
which is under the jurisdiction of the town administrator and board of selectmen. So I don't think that the authority of the Board of Health extends to appoint people from the Adams Police Department or animal control officer to do anything. If anybody is a designated agent, Mark as the code enforcement officer, and only Mark at this point in time.
Right, you mentioned down the road, we may have some discussions, but if you want this to go into effect tomorrow, then Mark will have full authority to oversee, to ensure this is enforced. My question goes to you, Mark, how are you gonna do this? Starting tomorrow, this needs to be enforced. If this is where it goes.
I think, if I could interrupt, I'm thinking, you know, we had discussed signs. And I think we got some pushback from Jerry Garner is that he was not gonna be paying for signs, and so it sort of dropped. I think Michelle DeRose has been looking at signs, and I mean, it's just, we can make it effective tomorrow, but I don't think hunting down people with dogs in the fields until we have the signs posted that would be,
It's gonna be a learning process.
it's gonna be a learning process, yes.
If you put a regulation in place, I would assume you would have some knowledge of how the enforcement will take place. I know it's gonna be new, many other communities do this, it's not new. But the code enforcement officer enforcing this, if they get a call from somebody at the field, we have a dog who's on the field, who's been barking at the players, is that, and it's at 7 at night, you have to, you know, so what is, I would think that the Board of Health would have a checklist, whatever it may be, for you to enforce, because they're giving you a regulation, giving you additional.
Yeah, and this is not something new to boards of health,
Exactly. Yeah.
okay? So you do have complaints being made about activities that are outside my regular business hours. And so you take those pretty much on the next business day. The Board of Health does have authority to assign designated agents. And Pittsfield, again, was the model I used in the initial draft. That green section is Dr. Rhodes referred to. The city of Pittsfield deputized its, or designated as its Board of Health agents, the police to enforce tobacco regulations in parks. And parks are even defined as on North Street, those little parks. So during COVID, we were in discussion about deputizing, if you will, the Adams Police to help with that COVID-19 enforcement. But our governor actually put that in the regulations himself, so that to alleviate that burden upon local boards, because we have the local boards meeting every week, and that was very challenging for them, how they were being burdened with all a great deal of additional code enforcement. So how I would deal with it, unless people are typically going to call the police, they're not going to call the Board of Health. Okay, the signage is already there. Not as what we would like to see, but it's
Right.
there. So if someone sees someone in violation, they're going to make a call to the police. So if the police think it's of an urgent nature or I need to be notified after hours, they'll call me, they have. Okay, so if I have to go out, I'll go out. I've never lost my hat at the end of the day. I would say with today's technology, the most complaints are gonna come by way of photographs, by email, photographs, or social media, something that could be verified. And like I said, then you have to go that extra effort to try to identify who that individual is. Most times they're identifying within that report who the individual is, and then we just have to track them down first. I've always got the cooperation from the police in doing that. Not in the dog sense, but in other related matters, okay? So this is nothing new.
Yeah, I agree, it's nothing new in this house, and they agree with it, but just, to ensure, Attorney St. John says the board cannot identify enforcement officers on their own,
Except for,
your
Yes, Mr.
one that has been assigned.
yes,
So, again, on 2 days from now, when this goes into effect, the police insurance safety issue, we're gonna take care of it. But the thing is, does the board want the police department chasing dogs around fields when the other crime that we have? So this is all another discussion. So again, Attorney St. John, I'm sorry to keep bothering you, but let's say in 2 days, this is approved, the code enforcement officer of the Board of Health will be the only agent at this time until we have further discussions that'll be able to enforce this regulation. Now, and we do everything by law, by attorney recommendations, by state law, that's how we work. So I
And
just
that's
need
the same.
I need to know, like, I know Pittsfield does it, other communities do it. How's Adams gonna do this? It's all gonna be documented.
same is true with infractions at restaurants.
Okay, let's, just point the direction, let's stick with where we are. I've asked this question several times. The code enforcement officer is your agent. He's going to enforce this until the board of selectmen and the town administrator, working with town council, the chief of police, come up with a plan to support the enforcement thereof of this regulation. But that may not happen for weeks, months, whatever it may be. So your code enforcement officer will be the individual that will be enforcing this. And when constituents from the community indicate that I had a complaint and I made a phone call and nothing's happened, which, it's going through a process, nothing is due or anything. So now the confidence starting to be confident. So I just need to know, as a board of selectmen, how is this going to be enforced 2 days from now, if it does, 3 days, whatever it may be. If it's your code enforcement officer that's gonna do this, it's gonna take, take care of all of the issues, then that's where it's gonna take it. The other thought is, let's hold off for a little while, but let's make sure everybody's on the same playing field, we all agree, come out together, we have a plan that the attorney St. John agrees with, Jay Green agrees with this, or selectmen agree with this, you agree with this, and then we move forward with a signed sealed plan that can be actionable.
So again, and I said it earlier, is having one more thing to enforce is no big deal. When the pandemic started, local agents were the only ones allowed to do code enforcement with one caveat, is the building inspector is allowed to do code enforcement, pandemic code enforcement for construction sites and manufacturing sites, but every other place in town fell under the Board of Health jurisdiction. So I was the one getting the calls. Mrs. Hoy was the chairman at the time of the Board of Selectmen, so she's aware of this. And so I would get these calls, I would be in communication with her, town administrator and the building commission. So it's no big deal whether it's me or any successor. It's just one more thing that you have to manage, and I think that my predecessors and I think it's satisfactory for the town.
Okay, my input for the public hearing. Thank you.
And
Sorry, I have two items. Section 7, fines, talks about first offense shall be no less than 50, second offense shall be no less than 100. The third and subsequent offenses shall be no less than $200, where the bylaw 14-8 actually says it's $300. So the town bylaw under violations and penalties with regard to dogs talks about violations. It's typically feces not picked up. It's 50 for a first offense, $100 for a second offense, $300 for a third or subsequent offense. In the town code, it is 14-8. So I'm just asking if that could be considered in your regulation draft here to be in line with what the town code says.
I don't have a problem with
Okay,
that.
so we'd be increasing it by $100 for the third offense. And then there was a comment made by Mr. Scrocky who said that the cemeteries are also posted
What's a bylaw?
for no dogs, so that's under a bylaw. So you wouldn't need to include that in a regulation for the enforcement to be done by the Board of Health where it's
No,
designated.
police enforcement.
Okay,
It's a-
under bylaw.
Right.
And so that's not anything,
Yeah.
because I didn't see it in the town code, but again, I would have to do a little bit more research to find that.
Right.
And so since I'm not finding the cemetery bylaw, I feel like there's a parks bylaw somewhere, and I'm gonna keep
Did
going
you
back
find
to
a
that.
cemetery bylaw?
Nope,
Really?
not that it says the town, so if you know the number, I'd love it.
So just to Mr. Scrocky's defense,
Yeah,
okay, he
you didn't need a
may be
defense.
confusing bylaw or regulation
Yeah,
or something of that nature. I've taught town residents who keep referring to ordinances, and we don't have those here.
correct.
So he may be confused as far as the actual legal source.
Okay, because so cemeteries, the enforcement is the police department, and we believe that that is a bylaw somewhere.
Pretty sure.
Because I'm just, yeah, I'm not
Town meeting,
nitpicking, I'm just
town
trying to
meeting.
make sure that, like,
Town meeting established.
Well, I think they voted it years ago.
okay,
That's my opinion.
so,
Yeah.
and I'm just trying to figure out why
Yeah.
cemeteries isn't included in this. If it's already being covered by something, are the parks already being covered by something?
Right.
And is this, now, that's the piece that I'm still not sure of an hour into this discussion. And I haven't heard a definitive answer to it, that there's been research done extensively to make sure that there isn't already something on the books that could be enforced. Or should these cemeteries now be included in this regulation? Just, that's where I'm at. And
Yeah, it's certainly in the bylaws, there's nothing about cemeteries.
I didn't see anything either. So if it's being enforced and it's already had signage, is parks situation already in place and it's being enforced maybe by, or could be enforced by APD and we don't know, like it's the unknown that I have that I don't think anyone in this room is able to necessarily solve.
Right.
To
Again,
bring me at peace, I'm sorry.
again,
I'm a little processing, I apologize.
we're looking at the athletic fields, and again, it's inviting teams from other towns. I feel that there's an urgency and a specificity to this.
I know.
It's
But we-
including but not limited to, and I can only do the including at this point. And so I,
Our cemeteries do invite out of state guests and
Of-
out of town guests.
but of
and so-
course, but
That's
people are
correct.
walking slowly and not en masse converging on a ball or something like that. I mean, there are,
Are you sure?
yeah, I mean, you don't play yes, right, you don't play soccer in cemeteries.
And with the cemeteries, there's usually limited entries, and so people are more respectful when they see that signage. And even if they are approached by someone, you're not supposed to have your dog up here. They're usually accommodating your request. And as Dr. states, this is entirely a different species. This is athletic.
You wanted to say
field.
animal too, didn't you?
Yeah.
You wanted to say. Come on, it's okay.
As I said, I wanted, my presentation of the parks commission was for any pets, even if one was the case. But here we are, with dogs and athletic fields.
So if I would like to ask Attorney St. John, if we have, as Board of Health, the authority on our own to issue this regulation with Officer Blaisdell as our designated enforcement agent, do we need approval from the Board of Selectmen in order to do that? We have allowed them to be here for their input. Do we need their approval?
Well, you don't need their approval because as a Board of Health, by virtue of Chapter 111, Section 31, you have the authority to make reasonable health regulations, which is what this regulation is. I personally would urge some caution in this because the definitions aren't complete. As far as this goes, it renders the ordinance unenforceable if Mr. Blaisdell is out there citing somebody for something on whatever the surface is, it hasn't been defined. So, apart from that, to answer what you're saying, yeah, can you go forward? You can go forward. Whether it has any teeth or enforceability is another issue.
I think that would be a matter for our discussion at once. So I would actually like to call for a motion, and I will read down the amendments to the proposed regulation, and then we can discuss further amongst the three of us and ask anyone else questions as we need. Is that suitable?
I'm gonna vacate the meeting because it's your decision and not ours.
We have two other items.
That
And
We need to
you
be-
should have been,
That was the amended agenda.
Okay,
you
well,
should have been of that, regarding the book donation box and as of last, and also the question of
facility request.
facilities use request. This is a on-standing request, but for an update, and so we do need, and so I would, we can vote within the public hearing, but you are indeed correct, so we can do it either way. So I will actually ask for a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close public hearing.
Second.
Any further discussion? No. Pete?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Yes, unanimously. This public hearing is now closed. The Board of Health will now deliberate and ask questions of those as needed. I would like to call for a motion to adopt the regulations of the Board of Health prohibition of dogs on athletic fields with the following amendments. Section 2A, list the 4 fields, Russell, Renfrew, Valley, and the 4th one is Reed, okay. In section 2D, where it talks about other individuals, additionally, organizers, players, we are deleting the second citation of organizers and adding town employees because they are also put at risk by dog feces. Moving down to section 6, enforcement. I added the sentence, for the purpose of this regulation, the code enforcement officer of the town of Adams shall serve as the board's designated enforcement agent. We are deleting sections B and C. They're dealing with the APD. And then in section 7, the third and subsequent offenses shall be no less than $300. And then finally, effective date. This regulation was adopted and approved by the Adams Board of Health on today's date and shall take effect. And maybe it would be wise to make that 1 week from today, give us time to make signs. So it would become effective on July 14th. And that I would then add a waiver of fines for subsequent 2 weeks until July 28th. But violations within that 14-day period will still count as violations for levying fines of future violations. That is it. Get all that, Michelle? Do I have a motion?
David, did we add the definition of athletic field in section 3? As recommended by town council?
I listed the fields. I thought that would be enough. So just add a separate paragraph there, athletic field. So I could just relist the athletic fields for the purpose. So put in separate athletic fields for the purpose of this regulation. The fields considered athletic fields are Russell, Renfrew, Valley, and Reed.
But it would just be the playing surfaces of those fields, gross parks areas.
If I may, Reed also has a playground, so if you need to define. So Reed, the playing surface is all fenced. Okay. Valley Street is all fenced. Renfrew, however, is not all fenced. You do have a basketball court that is outside.
Yeah, but
Both fenced areas between.
I wasn't considering that.
So you would need to define Renfrew, and I think you would also need to define Russell
Right.
as well. So if you could say playing, athletic playing.
Where the actual games are being played.
Right, and Russell would be used for football also.
Is that, I don't know, we're not still in talks. Russell is mostly gonna be softball.
Okay,
There's no fence here.
so the sports playing surfaces of,
I mean, there's tennis courts, I would,
Yeah.
basketball, you wouldn't want dogs on those surfaces as well.
Yeah, Russell's different ballgame.
Because I believe,
It's like Valley Street's all athletic.
doesn't Bart use the tennis courts on there?
Yeah,
Is that,
they use the whole field for gym classes.
so,
Yeah, yeah.
so there's a lot of people like that. Party dogs on there.
I don't have one, but they use it every year.
Yeah,
They're
They-
utilizing
they
that.
keep-
yeah, they use it for
The
their
whole
gym.
field would be considered a playing surface.
So for Russell, we need to define the tennis courts as well as the sports playing surface. Renfrew, you would need to define
Football and baseball,
football, baseball,
soccer.
soccer, and basketball.
Run through, say that it's baseball,
Football, soccer,
Yeah,
and basketball.
basketball. That's fenced in.
and any limitations on Valley or Reed.
Valley Street entirely. And then Reed, the fenced area.
Right.
Baseball and
Just softball, just softball.
Gnarly. And Reed fenced. Fenced in area, okay. I think that should. And so I will put that under separate definition. Athletic field as it applies to this regulation, the playing surfaces of the following fields with this, what's that?
that will go alphabetically, so athletic fields will come before nuisance.
Okay, the one athletic field before nuisance is fine. Done. Okay. So with that further amendment.
I feel uncomfortable voting on this without stamp of approval from town council. So I would ask you to read that piece, because that was one specific piece that he asked for. So that he can approve that.
What's the athletic field definition?
Yeah.
Yes.
There was a lot.
Okay.
There was a lot there.
Yes.
And then if there's anything else that needs to be added, I would ask for his opinion.
Okay, definition, athletic field as it applies to this regulation. Playing surfaces of town athletic fields is the definition. This will include Russell Field, including the tennis courts, Renfrew Field, baseball, football, soccer, and basketball playing fields, the entirety of Valley Field, and the fenced-in area of Reed Field.
Did you mean to include anything about the playgrounds? Because I heard discussion about for the children and playgrounds.
This playgrounds up also.
Yeah, this would not cover that, so the play areas, fields, which I find unfortunate, but again, I think we're trying to do what we can here. And the hope is that maybe this is a movement that will grow. Is there any appetite for adding the child play structures? Because then we would have to go to other fields under parks I would, again, when kids are playing there, usually parents, and it's not groups converging, well, so whatever.
Well, I mean, there's still the regulation that people still have to pick up after their dog,
And leash, and keep the dogs leashed.
right? So,
And I don't know who the enforcement is. Is that APD? I think the animal control officer is
Correct.
is responsible for dogs being leashed. Yeah. So that is so actually unleashed dogs on athletic fields, you could call the cops, regardless of this regulation.
Yes,
Enforceable, but, okay.
yes.
Yeah, okay, so let's just leave that as is and, restrict this to the athletic fields, in terms of our fine structure. So if you have a leash dog in the athletic field, you can be fined. So no walking the dogs. Okay. So with those amendments, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
Again, I would ask if there's anything else that town council would like to see added to this to give it more teeth for enforcement.
As far as enforcement, no, I think as long as you've defined the areas, I'm satisfied with that, and enforcement's going to be dealt with strictly by the code enforcement officer, not the Adams Police Department.
I apologize, Dave. Can you read the athletic field definition one more time?
So the definition of an athletic field as it applies to this regulation. The playing surfaces of the following fields with the areas included. Russell Field, the Russell Field would be softball, baseball, and tennis. Is that right?
No, Russell's is softball and tennis.
Softball, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so Russell is softball and tennis. Renfrew is baseball, football, soccer, basketball.
Correct.
Valley, the entirety of the field. And Reed, the fenced-in area
For softball.
for softball. Softball there. So do I have a motion?
We already.
Oh, we did, okay. Oh, this was a discussion part. Okay, and so we've clarified, we need an amendment to clarify I revised, or is it okay?
No, I think you. That was. You read it previous to that. So
Okay.
I was just asking for you to reread it, to make sure.
And I said, just kind of on the top of my head, that the effective date would be the 14th of July, but fines would not be instituted until after the 28th of July. Any discussion on that? All right. Are we ready to vote? Pete?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Dave, yes, so this unanimously passes. Thank you all, thank you all. Thank you all for your input. And also, thank you for your cautions, because I think we need to be aware of this going forward. And so I totally appreciate all of your points. May I have a motion to move the two items of make sure it's new business, old business. The two items of new business to next on the agenda.
So moved.
Second,
Second,
any discussion?
I only see one item under new business.
What's that?
I only see one item under new business.
You might have, I have, under new business, I have the Discover Books donation bin.
Yep.
And I have the town facilities request from the food vendor notice. And I know I added one of those after I submitted. And so the Discover Books donation bin, this was brought forward to us from Linda Cernick, head of Northern Berkshire Solid Waste Management District, that a,
And I think we're supposed to vote.
what's that? Oh, yes.
Okay, yes.
Yes.
Date, yes, okay. Agenda items moved up. And so I guess what the donation bin, so you've all had a chance to see information on the donation bin that was,
Textiles?
yeah, no, not textiles, this is books.
Do you need copies? I got some copies. I don't know.
The reason we wanted to involve you in this decision was because it's, as with the food, as with the textile, then we we made a recommendation because transfer station is partially under our authority and you and we both accepted the bin there. I think it's working well. And so this is a second recycle, and so I would actually invite the Board of Selectmen also just to weigh in. Let's let Mark just explain a little bit here.
So it's just a measure, another measure to reduce the amount of waste that going to the transfer station and the landfills. So these books are recycled in various forms. The greatest benefit is that these books are not going to be occupying space in the landfills.
So did either of you have a chance to look at the Discover Books website?
I did not go to the website.
I personally have some questions about it. And full disclosure, my wife is on the library board. And so she raised the issue is that, will this divert books from the library?
So I was gonna ask.
And I did put out a feeler. Holly Jacobs going to get back to me, but she didn't. But so I don't know what they do with books. I know they can't sell everything they get. But it is a fundraising for them. The second thing I did was to go to the Discover Books, because what they do is they harvest and resell what they can. One of my favorite authors is Walter Mosley, so I plugged in Walter Mosley, and he's got Devil in the Blue Dress, he's got the bunch of the color books, White Butterfly, and so forth. Paperbacks selling for $17, $18. So I went to Amazon, and yes, you can buy the same books, same price. So they are basically charging Amazon prices. If you look at the reviews of Discover Books, they say, the book was trash. I mean, you get a used book from Amazon, it's usually in pretty good shape. And people were complaining that books were scribbled over, sort of like looking like trash and stuff. So I am a little bit dubious about throwing my weight behind this without knowing a little bit more. Does anybody else have anything? You all have anything?
I just agreed that it would be nice to know how much the library depends on the donated books for their own fundraising. That was my big thing.
So can we continue this at a subsequent meeting, and it doesn't have to be joint. We can make our decision and pass it on to you as a request recommendation.
The other consideration is the Berkshire United Way Bookhouse that is in front of Memorial School is also a receptacle to take gently used books for people to then take home. It's supposed to be a give and take library. So, with that hurt, that program that's in all 32 communities in Berkshire County, that little bookhouse. So I wouldn't want us to be affecting that, because it was supposed to help with grade 3 level reading comprehension and trying to move those numbers up, which I know that it has happened. The other thing is that I just did a quick look, again, I've just seen this, it looks like only Pittsfield is doing this program in Berkshire County. Closest was outside of Pittsfield is Cummington and Goshen. But are those communities, like as David and Joyce have pointed out, are those communities where their libraries do not accept books? Because that's what this website says, it's for communities where the libraries aren't taking books anymore. But it also looks like there's a charge.
No, they said no charge on that.
So it's a cost to an individual. If they wanted to, again, I'm just trying to do this quickly.
And also, Dane.
Yeah.
So I never thought about that, but what I keyed in on here, books that are otherwise going into the recycle bin of the transfer station, which actually should be going into the transfer or recycle transfer station. So this was, my first one was an alternative to that improper disposal of recycled materials at the transfer station, because we weren't going to put it down at visitor control, or visitor center, or at the library, because we're not people confusing it as a book return. So yeah, there's additional consideration I agree with that we need to explore.
Yeah, I did. One day at the transfer station, I walked. I'm pretty sure it was paper recycled. There was like a whole set of Encyclopedia Britannica there. And it's like, some of you in this room might not even remember. Oh, well, you remember what? It's like-
Thank you for thinking of that.
And it was like, oh my God, because I don't know if that's, but the thing about the Discover Books is that they apparently pulp those for home insulation. I mean, that is some benefit, but I you know, just kind of, yeah.
So yeah, we should continue this to another meeting.
Yeah, let's,
for,
yes, enough said. So we will, I'll talk to Linda Cernick and see what, yeah, so, okay, so moving on to the final agenda item for the Board of Selectmen is the town facilities use request is that we would really like to have some notification if food vendors are going to be present at events on town property, so that in a timely fashion, so that Officer Blaisdell may make sure obviously most of the vendors that show up at Ramble Fest or Aggie Fair have seasonal passes, and so just needs to check those off. But there are often new vendors or vendors from out of state sort of say, oh, I'd like to come. So we would just like whoever organizes an event is that they inform the vendors that they expect to come, that they need to get a permit from us, and so there's not a last minute scramble. It doesn't look good for us as a town if some say, oh, you can't set up your taco truck here because you don't have a permit, and Officer Blaisdell is out, you know, doing something else. And so there are a couple of ways that we could word this under item 4, special circumstances, add circumstance B. And I think Officer Blaisdell wanted 2 weeks notice.
Would you place it there, or would you place it similarly to where page 2, alcoholic beverages are not allowed on premises unless a special license has been obtained from the Board of Selectmen? So could you say, you know, food vendors are not allowed on premises unless a special license or a special permit has been obtained from the Office of the Board of Health? And then it would be a, do you want to obtain a special license? A yes, no, which usually is flagged by a staff member, and then a conversation could happen at that time. I mean, I think under special circumstances, you might be able to put something there too, but I think people gloss over the 5 items, and then they get into filling out a form, and they might see it there.
You're kind of opening Pandora's box if you're asking where we would like it to be on your form.
Yeah.
I would like it to be on number 2. Check off the facilities that you wish to use and indicate that you have beverages.
That one doesn't make
So-
sense to me.
Wherever it's going to go, we need to include Michelle and primarily Deb. Another alternative that we briefly spoke about is to put it under permanent items.
Will form under permanent?
Yes. Of facilities use requesting. And we should have it online. And indication sign-offs that are needed.
I would recommend that, just because residents tell me it's not user friendly, so I don't wanna, I haven't explored it myself, so I can't.
I just like to say it's a reasonable request. I think that when you talk about food safety, that's very important. Wow, and you like that beneficiary.
You like
have
to do
tainted
this?
food or isn't cooked properly. So I think it's a reasonable request. Where you put it is, could be judgment of where you feel it fits best.
Want to do a workshop issue and
The
one of
board
us,
will have it as an agenda item, a workshop, which we're going to discuss this for anyways, to renew it, so
so,
you have the opportunity to come and
yeah,
provide your inputs as we get there.
yeah, so copy me and so either Mark or me or we'll show up to try to, that would be, because I think permit eyes is a great idea. I don't know what the time frame on that is. And I think changing the paper form gets us there sooner. Does that make sense?
I would think so. We'll have someone come in and discuss with us.
Yeah,
Permit,
yeah,
so.
okay,
So this form, if we were to do it on the permit side, I can tell you that the permit the challenges are that we share that with 8 other communities. Doing the facility use request, we'd be the only community doing this. So we would construct it. Be the only communities.
yeah. Okay, so, great, well, thank you. So, we have no further business with formal business, with the board of selectmen. So, your excuse, that's what you have to.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn
Made by
and
John, second by Christine, all in favor?
Hi.
we're adjourned and
Thank you.
yeah, you're very
Thank you
welcome.
for appointments.
Yep.
Right. Okay, so, we do not have minutes and, no dishonor there. So, I do, so I'm just trying to get back to our agenda. So the next item is old business, American Lung Cancer Screening Initiative. Have a chance to look into it any further?
I did. I had a very nice conversation with Anna from the American Lung Association. What they're looking for is they're looking for communities, organizations, agencies that are willing to promote a 45-minute video that walks through the importance of lung screening. And then they come into your community and they look for resources. She said it could be recorded and shown at a later date. And basically it's just to raise awareness. They don't do any actual screening.
Right,
So it's
right.
kind of, I don't know if I could say, yeah, I think we should invite them. 'Cause it just didn't.
Yeah. My thought is that it's great. And I would love to have a very robust Board of Health website with health tips. I mean, some towns, you go look up various things, resources and so forth. Of course, it takes a lot of effort to keep that up to date. But I think just as a standalone for us to put it out, it would just sort of, I'm enthusiastic, but I think if any other thoughts?
Yeah, I agree.
So, okay, so I think we can just say thanks, but no thanks, and that may be later on when. So, okay, thank you. Moving on to the next agenda item. The Berkshire Health Alliance 2022 Public Health Nursing Contract. I think you got my email. It's Alliance, and again, full disclosure, I'm vice president of the Alliance, but it looks like the Alliance is the only game in town for public health nursing services at this juncture. Berkshire VNA stopped providing services very abruptly weeks after they sent us a contract. And so we do need, by law, we need to have public health nursing coverage. I will eventually ask for a vote to send the contract on to the individuals, Jay, accountant, and so forth. So Mark is gonna.
So when we send it forward, you should include the costs. Costs.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, yes. So the total cost is 3,970 with the quarterly of 992.50 in installments. So yes. Yeah, I've added that, or Laura sent me this morning, the one with what she added.
So edit this for us. And
Yeah.
then send it over to Town council. Jay and
Crystal, yes. Yeah, I mean, that was, Berkshire VNA was one that asked for those three signatures. So I think BRPC, because it's Tom Azuso, their president, who's signing it, because their grants and funding go through the commission. And so we only need a designated authority in town to sign it. So I will leave that for Ed and Jay to decide on, so they can.
All right. And I would also suggest that you, Jerry, in communication with Gardner, the building commissioner, who also works that second as director of special services. He will know exactly what figures we have budgeted for this fiscal year for DNA.
Right.
Whether or not it's got to extract these funds from sources.
When I went back, the VNA contract was for like $2,300, and this is almost 4,000. But I budgeted 3,000 for nursing services under the idea that we might want to run a flu clinic, wellness clinic, whatever. And so this is actually only $970 more than what I anticipated. But it covers TB monitoring, which costs us over $4,000 for one patient. So it's a good deal. And I should say that I did confer with Jim Willis, who's basically providing public health nursing to South County. And he said that, that the true cost of public health nursing is actually greater than this, which is why VNA had to bag out. The Alliance can do it because they have grant funding. And he was actually suggesting that we form a Northern Berkshire, similar to the regional emergency response committee type of structure for public health nursing in North County here, but that's down the road. So any other thoughts or questions?
That's a good idea.
Yeah, so may I have a motion to recommend that the town accept this contract from the Berkshire Public Health Alliance with the fees added, the $3,970 annual.
Second.
Any further discussion? Pete?
Yes.
Joyce?
Yes.
Dave? Yes, thank you. I feel good. So, thank you. And then back to the agenda. What else is there? I don't see anything here. Does anyone, any mail of interest that came in? Other, for the go to the order, any further thoughts? Scheduling our next meeting. What do we think about next month?
Fine with either one of the dates. Either of the three.
Me too.
So, all right, so let me just see if I can, I mean,
I guess I would prefer the 18th. We have a choice, but I'm good with the other two. You guys have a preference.
let's do the 18th. Let's take it, because we've had. Yeah, okay. So,
And if I get any requests for any correction or appeals, they have to be held within 30 days unless it's.
so we only need two of us for that, and we could do it by Zoom. So we do have some flexibility there, but yes, we stand ready at your beck and call. So thank you. And great. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Pete,
Yes.
Joyce,
Yes.
Dave, yes. So I have 5:52 PM. This meeting of the Adams Board of Health is now adjourned on July 7th, 2021. You may stop the recording.